Good morning and welcome to the How to Love Living podcast. My name is Jeremy, and this podcast is just strategies to how to love living and how to get the best and most out of your life. This week's episode is on New Year's goals. So one caveat I'll put out there right now on the audio recording, and I apologize for this, is currently I live in the city of Seattle, and currently we have some helicopters that are working through homeless encampments and tearing them down. I don't want to get political about that, but you will hear helicopters. It's been a very difficult year in the city of Seattle just from the protests and everything. So if you're hearing that noise, that's the helicopters moving homeless encampments. Anyway, moving on to the podcast. So this podcast is just how to love living and how to really embrace life and embrace the challenges, embrace the beauties, and really work through and get to that point where you can really love life. This week's episode is just talking about the New Year's. So we have our New Year's coming up here in a couple days. And depending on when you're listening to this, it may be already the New Year. But regardless, the New Year is upon us. What's good about the New Year's is this is an opportunity for us to really sit down, reassess ourselves, reassess our goals, reassess where we're at, and make and implement change if we are open and ready and have the ability to do so. So that's what I want to talk about today, is just how to implement goals and changes and then work on seeing success or recognizing failure and navigating through that. So of course, I'm not going to just ignore the fact that we're human. We are all flawed in our own individual ways. Some of those flaws actually make us beautiful. And those flaws are something that I argue we should embrace. But I'll say also that human life is an evolution of, it's an evolution of progress and growth. And so that progress and growth is just part of the human experience. Now, I know that some people get stuck and they kind of slow down their progress and growth. They can't stop it completely because there's always new things you need to learn. There's always new things that you have to navigate through, but you can slow it down. And I'm not here to judge that. So I'm not here to say having no goals is a bad thing. I'm not here to say having goals is an excellent thing. It all depends on where you're at. But if you're like me, I do like to challenge myself a bit. So I do like to have goals that I'm working towards, and with the constraint of understanding there's limits and boundaries on what I can achieve. In fact, I get accused by my friends of trying to achieve too much. And that is a flaw in and of itself. But what I'll say is that if you don't challenge yourself, if you don't try to grow, for me, that's really important, that I do try to challenge and grow myself. And so that's where I do feel strongly about goals for me. And so hopefully some of the techniques I use will help you if you're interested in establishing goals for yourself and achieving them. And kind of what I do to measure success and kind of the things that I do to make sure that I'm on task with them. And if there is hiccups along the way, that I understand that and I'm very forgiving. So, in the psychology of goal setting, there's one component of it that I want to just kind of address up front is self-forgiveness. And one of the things that I think makes people fearful of goal setting is, can they forgive themselves? Can they really sit down, and if they don't achieve a goal or if they miss a goal, can they forgive themselves? And that's where you really do have to do a lot of inner reflection. And ultimately, if you can't forgive yourself for not achieving a goal, that really hinders your ability to achieve the goal. And the reason I would argue that is because if you get stuck on your failure, that will become the focus and it will distract away from the success you could see because you're distracted on your failure. So the kind of advice that I kind of like, so let's use, and I use a lot of examples in the podcast because I think that it just helps in explaining the concepts I'm talking about. But let's use, let's say that you want to go on a diet. And so you set a goal to be on the diet, and you have a cheat day. You have a day that wasn't designed or, set up as a cheat day. For me, like an example would be that I bought Girl Scout cookies and I bring them home, and I convinced myself I'm going to have one. I'm just going to have one. So I have my one. And then, half hour later, I'm like, well, two isn't really going to hurt me. I can have two. So I went back and got another one. So then 2 hours later, I'm like, well, those Girl Scout cookies are really good. Let's have a couple more. So by the end of the evening, I'm halfway through one of the things, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, let's just finish them. I mean, at this point, I've done the damage. Let's just finish it off. That is a logical mindset that, although it seems like I can control it, I really can't. I don't have the wherewithal to have a lot of sugar and junk food in the house. So what I've learned with my diet perspective is I have to not bring that stuff into the house and eat it. So all the things I bring into the house have to be cooked in some manner. And even when they're cooked, they're not extremely satiating, meaning that, I want to use food as a fuel, not as a pleasure. I mean, I definitely want to have the pleasure of food, but I also understand that it's a fuel. And for stuff I'm cooking at home, I would rather, I'm not a good cook. Well, so some people think I'm a good cook. I don't think I'm a good cook. That's life. But what I'll say is that if I'm just cooking plain and simple hearty foods at home and I'm eating healthy, that when I go out and have dinner with a friend or what have you, I can splurge a little bit in having something that's a little more either exotic or tasty or what have you, and know that I'm always going to go back to my routine of having just, hearty, healthy foods at home. So that's my justification. Whatever makes me feel better, and that makes me feel better. So, but what I'll say is that you can get down these rabbit holes on goals where, I have that cheat night where I've eaten the whole thing of Girl Scout cookies. I'm like, well, screw it. I'm just going to go do it. And then that completely dislodges me from my diet. So now the next day I'm like, well, I'm not going to be able to do this because I failed yesterday and I'm a failure, and down that rabbit hole. The problem with that mindset is there's no forgiveness, and there's a lot of underlying causes of why a person would be unforgiving to themselves. And I will say this in this episode as well. Seeing a mental health counselor, a therapist, is something I highly recommend for every single individual in the USA. And it's not, well, in the world, really. And it's not because we're all mentally broken. It's because we all need some mental education. And there will be a podcast episode upcoming here where I will talk about that a bit and discuss finding the good therapists, understanding the ups and downs of therapy sessions and understanding connection and all that sort of stuff. So we'll talk a bit about that in a future episode. But if you're beating yourself up a lot about failure, I don't I don't think that's fair to be so hard on yourself. I don't think that's fair. And the reason I don't think that's fair is because it's really doing more harm than good. And definitely I think self-criticism is something that you should have. Like I think it's healthy to have self-criticism, but it's healthy to have self-criticism where it's productive, and it isn't healthy, and it's something, and really, and this is another podcast episode I'm going to create in the future, is just talking about your thoughts versus your emotions versus you, and discuss kind of, your thoughts and emotions are tools for you to kind of navigate the world. And with tools, some tools present themselves and you don't need them. So you could be really angry at someone, but that tool of anger may not be necessary for the circumstances. So you disregard that tool. And that's how you look at thoughts. And that's what I'll argue here, is that then when you're having a lot of feelings of, defeatism, I'm never going to do this, getting down on yourself, it's really tough to kind of come back from that. And so if you can get to a place, and really Eckhart Tolle is kind of the master at explaining this stuff. So A New Earth and The Power of Now are two books I highly recommend, and especially the Oprah podcast, or it's the Oprah podcast that she did with Eckhart years ago, that talks about just understanding your mind and understanding your thoughts and feelings and emotions. And so I definitely recommend his books and recommend the Oprah podcast. I'll link those in the show notes for today's podcast. But getting back to goals, though, it's then setting yourself up for success by allowing for failure and giving space for failure, with the understanding that the very next day you're going to brush yourself off, get up, and get back on the path. And that's kind of how I look at goal setting. So let's talk a little bit about goals and just kind of how to create goals, what are goals that you would want to achieve, and that sort of stuff. The first thing I'll put out there is, one of the reasons I believe there's a lot of failure in goals is because we set too many goals. So, it's funny because I've done this every year. I want to lose weight. I want to travel a lot. I want to enhance my career. I want to buy a new house. I want to buy a new car. I want to go through and redecorate. I want to do spring cleaning. I want to. And everything becomes so much that nothing gets accomplished, or very little gets accomplished. I can't say nothing. I think that, really, it's not that nothing will get accomplished. It's just that you kind of naturally break down the goals to the ones that are most important. But sometimes some of the most important ones get skipped because they get lost in the melee of picking through all the goals you set and which ones are important. So I would argue that don't pick too many goals. Pick some achievable goals and pick SMART goals. And SMART goals, you can Google this, just type in SMART goals in Google, and it'll give you kind of a good outline of what a SMART goal is and how to put it together. I highly recommend using SMART goals when you're setting goals for yourself. And the reason I do is because I think that it's the most succinct way to really establish goals and keep them on a path of success. And with just setting arbitrary goals, it's harder. With SMART goals, it's better. So here's kind of the definition of a SMART goal. Is the S for SMART goal in the SMART is specific. The M is measurable. The A is achievable. The R is realistic. And the T is timely. So the specific, the goal has to be specific. It has to be something that is specific enough. And so you got to really stay away from amorphous goals that are more general, like I'm going to eat healthy. Well, what's eating healthy? Have you established like what things are healthy for you and what things are not healthy for you and that sort of stuff? Or another one could be, I'm going to lose all the weight. And well, what is all the weight? What's the number? Or I want to do something new. Well, what is that something? And so really challenge yourself to get specific about what you want to achieve. And what I'll add to that is, so let's say that you set something specific in as a goal for the new year. If it changes, just change the goal. So if the specific thing that you set either changes because of circumstances or what have you, now it's a new specific thing kind of related, just change the specific thing to be the new specific thing that's kind of related. And don't get it too attached to, get attached to the overall goal, but don't get attached to details in the goal if they change. Just, stick to getting the goal accomplished is what I'll say, because it could get pretty arduous if you're going through and setting goals and then they change. You're like, well, why am I doing this if it's always changing? But you got to really be flexible in allowing for circumstances and for challenges to appear in the goals and then, navigate through that. So an example of that is, let's say, well, I said, okay, I want to do a marathon in March. I've done marathons in the past and I haven't been running for a while, but running is one of my goals. So that's why I picked marathon. But let's say I set a goal. I want to do a marathon in March. Well, let's say then all of a sudden I hurt my knee, which that has been one of the reasons I haven't been running. And it's something where I'm working on getting them back to normal and, that sort of stuff. But so my goal now is squashed because I can't do the marathon in March. Well, how about if I changed the specificity of the goal and said, well, let's set that goal. Let's move the date to July because I feel like my knees are going to be better then. Let's do it and be done with it. Now the goal's still on task. We got a new date and we're good to go. So that's what I'm talking about in just flexibility with your goals and giving yourself space within that flexible ability. So then the M is measurable. So is it something that you can, at the end of the year, can say, okay, this was achieved and I can measure the achievement. So, if I wanted to run every single day, then I look and check my logs to make sure I'm running every day. If I have a day where I miss running or what have you, then be it. But generally I achieve the goal. And really that's what I look for when I'm looking for goals, is I'm not looking for, just perfection because I'm human. I'm looking for, did I generally achieve this goal? And so that's kind of the idea. So measurable, is it achievable? So, okay, so I say to myself, well, I want to run 365 or want to actually I want to run 400 times next year. Well, there's only 365 days. So pick goals that are achievable. So pick things that you can actually achieve. So like for me with my running will be a goal I'm going to set this year, and I am already in the mindset of understanding that, at first it's going to be short runs, and then runs will grow over time. My goal is to go outside with the intention to run 4 days a week. So that means I have my running gear on. I go outside. If my knee is bothering me and that sort of stuff, then I get my knee brace and make sure I have that on. And at first, I'm going to do probably some short jogs and then walk the rest out. And then over time, I'm going to increase that as I get more comfortable. So that's a way of making a goal achievable and then measuring for success. Make the goal realistic. So that's the R in SMART goals. So make it something that's realistic to you. And what I'll say to that is, if you know that the goal you're setting, if you know in your heart of hearts that the goal you're setting is not realistic, that you're realistically either mentally or physically or emotionally not able going to be, or not, you are not going to be able to complete the goal, then let it go and be okay with that. We're not perfect. We're these imperfect human beings doing the best we can with what we got. And love is very important. Self-love is very important. And part of self-love is forgiveness. That if you aren't able to achieve something, don't set that goal. The last one for the SMART goals is T for timely. So for me, this one's pretty simple. It's by the end of the year. So I usually just say generically by the end of, so an example of a SMART goal for me, I want to run 4 days a week, every week by the end of the year. And so that's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's realistic, and it's timely. And that's it. That's setting a goal. Now, what are my goals? So I kind of picked 5 areas that I want to work on for my goals. So the first area is my health. I want to work on ensuring that my health is still on track. And so again this year, so I set this last year, I'm going to set this again this year. I'm not setting a goal of running, and I'm not setting a goal of doing a specific action for fitness, just because I know that I need to navigate through my knee issue and that sort of stuff. And at the moment, I just don't have the wherewithal to really kind of kick into running. So my goal is, again, I'm going to carry this over, is to close my circles. So I have a fitness tracker, and on the fitness tracker, it has 3 circles. One is for calories burned in activity. Another is exercise for 60 minutes is kind of what I have. And then I have standing 12 hours. And so it tracks it on my watch, and then it gives me updates as I go throughout the day. So then closing the circles means that I've achieved those 3 things for that day. And so there are days where I close the circles and I'm done. And then there's days where, on an off day, I may double the amount that I have achieved. So that has been pretty good for me, is just setting that goal, closing my circles. And if I get to the point, so as we move forward and the cold weather kind of leaves, I'm kind of concerned about snow and that sort of stuff. But I think for me, running is, I don't like to run indoors. I like to run on the streets. I think for me, the goal for running will kick in March, once we kind of get past, any threats of snow and that sort of stuff. So we'll kind of watch and see where that one goes. Another goal I have is I want to decrease the amount of spending I do this year. So This goal, what I'm working towards is I'm working towards setting up a budget each month and sticking to that budget. So the idea is I give myself some allowance for extra spending, but then I don't go outside of that allowance. So that's my goal for that. So it's measurable because I'm setting up a budget. Second is it's specific because I got the specifics of the budget built out. And it's achievable because I'm going to set myself up for success. If I slip, which I probably will, I will forgive myself and then get back on the path and just move along with that and really work towards getting better at that. My next goal is relationships. I really do want to be more engaged in relationships as we move into 2021. And the reason for that is we've been in the pandemic for the year of 2020, and it's been a fun year, if you don't get the sarcasm in my voice. So I really do want to be present in the relationships I have. I have a goal of reaching out to each of my friends at least once every 2 weeks. And as well, I want to set up at least one dinner with each friend in this coming year. So at least get to spend time with one each person one time this year. So if I can achieve that goal, I will be really happy. I'll be happy because I have friends I see fairly often. I have friends that I don't get to see very often, nor do I talk to very often. So my goal is to be more present in my relationships and the friendships that I have. My other goal is reading. I read a lot. So I will say this about myself is I have a lot of books I've read and I read a lot of books and I have a lot of books on backlog. And so I created a playlist of about 100 books that I want to achieve this year. And so my goal this year is to get through the 100 books, which will be easy for me. Considering now, and this is how you can kind of measure how I read, and I know it's extraordinary for average people, but I read The Stand twice in 2020. I really love it. It's like one of my favorite books from Stephen King, and I have a love-hate relationship with Stephen King, but The Stand for me was like a really 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 good book, and I read it twice, and it's a good oh geez, it's a good 3,000 page book, so it's a substantial book to take, and I do it on my Kindle, so I'm not certain about the specific pages, but I know it's a very, very long book. And it's a very, very good book. I like how Stephen King really builds out the characters. You feel pretty passionate about the characters and that sort of stuff. But getting back to the reading, there is a ton, because I'm doing the podcast now, there's a ton of what I'll say is kind of research, quote unquote, plus there's stuff I'm interested in. So my goal is to read these 100 books on just different kind of concepts around either self-help or spirituality or that sort of stuff. And from a spiritual perspective, I'm I'm not a believer in kind of quote unquote God. And I hope I don't offend anyone out there. I think that much of my peer group is kind of like that. Not many religious people here in Seattle, but I do believe in some sort of spirituality. And I don't know if that spirituality is the connectiveness between human beings, being that we're all from Earth and we are connected to the animals and the things around us because we all kind of organically came from this place. Or, maybe there is something more. I don't know. I was actually at a dinner party earlier this year and someone kind of accused me of kind of spreading my bet on, God versus spirituality and that kind of stuff. And, I don't know if there is clear answers for me. And if you have found those answers, I really am happy for you. For me, at the moment, I'm very okay just kind of letting it be out there. So I do read books on spirituality, and I do read books on that sort of stuff. And what I'll say is, from that perspective, I do believe there are good things in the spiritual books like the Bible. I do think the 10 commandments are kind of good general ways to live life, don't break these rules, and they seem pretty logical. And I think that, yeah, there's kind of some weird stuff if you get into the Old Testament and that sort of stuff, but I do think there are valuable things that come out of religious books, and so I don't discount them. I just am cognizant as I'm reading them of what I'm taking in, and picking and choosing the usefulness of said things. I can't discount a ton of human history and a ton of human works just because of the overall tone or the overall message and theme. I think you lose a lot. I think that, we can be succinct enough to understand what we're reading and still gain value out of it. I don't know. That's just me. Anyway, so I'm going to update Goodreads. So Goodreads, I'm not going to put that out there right now. I think maybe what I'll do is, as I kind of get into the Goodreads stuff, Goodreads is something I've always wanted to use to kind of track what I'm reading and give feedback on books. And that is one thing that I'm not very good at, is doing reviews. I value reviews, but I never create reviews. I think part of it is because I hate writing. So I'm going to work on that. So that's another goal I have, is to read these 100 books and get them posted onto Goodreads in 2021. The last item that I'm working on in 2021 is I want to get the YouTube channel created for How to Love Living. So that YouTube channel will be a new way for me to interface with you. This will give me the capability of posting out the podcast episodes on the YouTube channel. So right now, the audio, I kind of got audio down. Like, I get how to do a recording and that sort of stuff. But the YouTube channel will really allow me to dig in and get that next level of content out there, where I want to do some YouTube videos where you can actually see me, and I want to do some just life hacks sort of stuff, talk about jobs, talk about resumes, talk about different stuff from that perspective. Anything kind of in the realm of improving and creating happiness in your life. I want to cover kind of a spectrum within that area of areas where, and things and skill sets that will help you in improving and, getting over kind of different challenges as they come up in life. So the YouTube video, and really it's getting the specifics of it, is I want to get the podcast posted out onto YouTube each week. And then above and beyond that, I want to create 1 or 2 videos a month that are outside of the podcast that will be additional content for my listeners, that gives them additional things they could learn and additional things that I'm learning as we kind of go on this journey together. Now, the last kind of item I'll pick up is long-term goals. So long-term goals are different from kind of short-term yearly goals that you'd set up on New Year's. And some of them are harder to kind of come to reconciliation of. And so one thing I'll say is, when you're looking at your goals, figure out, kind of measure and say, is this something I want long term? And like an idea of that would be, let's say you say, well, I want to lose weight. And ultimately, what are you wanting to lose weight for? And, I think a lot of people get in the trap, and I know I've gotten in this trap as well, that, well, I want to lose weight because I want to look good in my swimwear. So I want to go on the beach and look good and all that sort of stuff. Well, let's kind of dig down a little bit deeper. why do you want to look good, And well, I want to look good because then I'll feel great about myself. Well, what makes you feel great about yourself? Well, what makes me feel great about myself is that when I'm eating healthy and I've got kind of a good flow in my, you know, routines where I'm going out and I'm getting my exercise, I'm eating healthy, and I, have days where I'm not eating as healthy, but generally I'm eating healthy. Well, while all of that ends up transitioning just from an individual yearly goal of weight loss to a health goal and a lifetime health goal. And so then with that transition, and I think this is a very logical and I think it's the right transition, is transitioning to the two things on health. And I'll just put this out here because it's something I've explored a lot, is trying to understand health, trying to understand aging, and trying to reconcile them. Because I think a lot of times we look at youth as kind of healthy. And then we look at as you age as, well, things just start breaking down. And, I do not believe that. I think that we want to believe that, but I do not believe that. And I don't believe that for myself. So what I'll say is there's no point where you can be beyond the point where healthy is never going to be part of your vocabulary. I think there might be challenges that you'll have to work through to get to that point. Like there may be, you know, issues that happened when you're a kid, or there may be people in your lives that don't follow these things and they're very close to you, and that's a struggle or what have you. But what I'll argue is changing circumstances, getting to a place where you're healthy and happy is very important. And so setting that goal, I think a lifetime goal of health, meaning that I'm eating healthy, that I'm getting out and, exercising. And please, exercising is getting out and just going for a walk. I mean, if you think about it, there's a lot of people in the world that don't even do that. And so, even going out for a walk and creating kind of systems around that make the walk enjoyable is something that can help a lot. So for me, when I go out for walks, I listen to audiobooks or I listen to podcasts or that kind of stuff. But my eventual goal is to get back into running and is going to be getting back into weightlifting. I do push-ups right now, and that's something that took me a bit to get started back into. But yeah, it's just setting small goals around health and realizing that health is going to be a focus for the rest of your life. And so I think that it's nice to set a goal of weight loss to look good in a bikini, but I think ultimately it's setting that goal of weight loss or looking good in your swim trunks, but ultimately it's setting that weight loss goal for the long term where it's not about weight. There are plenty of people that are healthy that are not, perfect body shapes. And I don't think you have to be. I think that health is much more important than meeting societal needs. And definitely you should be happy with your body and you should be happy with, that sort of stuff. But be happy with your body because you are happy with your body. Society has a definition of beauty. Challenge yourself to say, I am going to define beauty the way I want to define beauty. And I think health can be built into that definition. And so health being that you're getting your walks, you're doing your due diligence on food, and, taking care of your body, knowing that you're going to need it in the long term. And then be happy kind of with where you're at and what you have, and be happy with, not achieving it all the time, and be okay with, having setbacks and then getting back onto the path. So I think that my general message around goals is just allow for failure, make them measurable, make them SMART goals, and really see if there are goals out there that can navigate towards lifelong goals. So I want to try a hot tip. And this one is kind of, it just cracks me up. So I figured, well, I'm going to put this out here and we'll see where this goes. And I'm going to try to do this every episode. So the hot tip this week is we're going through the pandemic right now. And we've gone through these pandemics in the past. We had the 1918 pandemic, and that one kind of put us for a loop back in 1918 through 1920, and we're definitely feeling the pandemic this year putting us for a loop. And I apologize for all those affected by the pandemic. This was terrible times. But here's what I'm going to say is after we got past the pandemic in the 1918, 1920s, we had the roaring 20s. If you don't know what the roaring 20s are, the 1920s, go and research it. It was a huge moment of economic success. So what I'm going to say is, and of course I'm not a predictor of the future, but my hot tip is this, is I anticipate that we're going to see another kind of huge recovery when we get out of this pandemic. And so ready yourself for that. You know, if you're looking for new opportunities, or if you're looking to grow skill sets, or you're looking to do things to improve your situation, be ready for the pandemic to come out of its cycle and people start getting out and start participating in society and our economy. I think people are just hungry to get out and start participating. So I anticipate a lot of activity and a lot of economic success. And especially like here in Seattle, we've had like 90 restaurants and bars close. I don't anticipate that's going to be long term. I think that's a short term thing. I feel terrible for the businesses that went under, but they're going to bounce back. The same people that own those businesses that went under are going to come back. They're going to reopen new businesses. The new businesses are going to be even more amazing. Hopefully, we're going to invest a lot of money into our local economies and really invest a lot of money into rebuilding our local economies. And it just should be a boom. We should see like a huge economic upturn, which will then lead to better things for everyone. So my hot tip is, wherever you are, do everything you can to set yourself up for success when we start experiencing this boom. Get the new skill sets, get the new ideas, get the things that will put you at the most success you can experience when we go into this kind of economic recovery over the next, gosh, it's going to be like 10 years, I think, is kind of what we're going to see. But we'll see. I don't know. That's kind of my feeling right now. I'm getting excited for it, and I'm hopeful that it will kind of come to fruition. Well, anyway, thank you for listening to this podcast. I appreciate all the listeners. If you have questions, you can contact me at contact@howtoloveliving.com, or you can go to howtoloveliving.com and go to the contact page there. I post blog entries out there at the moment, and I do post onto Twitter. And next year, I'm going to start working on YouTube and hopefully a little bit on Instagram. So definitely reach out. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the new year.